I really appreciate you all being here at this very late point of the semester here at Marshall. So thanks to everyone who's here live. Thanks to everyone who will be watching this later on YouTube. It's a pleasure to sort of moderate this conversation today. This is the second one of our Marshall University Digital Humanities Conversations. We had one a little bit earlier in April on video game creation. There was a student-led panel. This panel is faculty-led, but we also have a student representative here. And we'll have a conversation on community archiving. And the way this is going to work is we have two teams. I'll introduce the first team here in a second. They'll tell you a little bit about their community archiving project. Then I'll introduce the second team. They'll talk a little bit, and then we'll have a larger conversation at the end. I'll be monitoring the chat as well. Feel free to ask questions as they come up, and I'll read those out at the end here. But you're also heartily invited to speak as well. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to the first team, which will be talking about the American Rosie movement project specifically in a pedagogical context. And first off, we'll have Dr. Wook-Sung Yoo, who is a director, who's the director of research and a professor at the College of Engineering and Computer Sciences here at Marshall University. He has a diverse academic background in various STEM areas and a strong interest in interdisciplinary research. And you'll see that here in a second. He is currently teaching a capstone project class in the computer sciences program. And presenting with him will be Dr. Julie Synder-Yuly, who is an assistant professor of communication studies, where she serves as the basic course director. She's also an affiliate faculty with Digital Humanities, and her research focuses on the intersections of race, class, gender, specifically in the area of social media and communication. So thank you very much for willing to talk to us today about the Rosie movement project, and I'll hand it over to our presenter team here.
Great. Okay, thanks for introduction. I'm Dr. Yoo, just mentioned by, introduced by Stefan. We actually, as a team, Julie and I have been talking about what is the project for the digital humanity. And then we came up with the American Rosie movement, which I have been doing with the client who is the director of the American Rosie movement for the time being. And then we decide to collaborate, not in the huge level, but in a certain level. So at the beginning, we talked about expanding their project, talking and interviewing some of the Rosies. But I think that that's not a great way to start. And then we reduce the scope of the project a little bit smaller. So let me share my PowerPoint slide, and then let me continue to talk about this one. Okay, just wait a minute. Okay, can you see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so this is about the American Rosie movement project in the DH in a classroom. So, what I'm going to do is I will introduce the project done in the capstone project in the computer science program first. And then I will pass the presentation to Dr. Schneider so she can continue on what's happening in her class. So I'll start with my class. So the American Rosie movement, the purpose of the American Rosie movement is to carry on the legacy and the attitude of the Rosie in the world around us. So we want to have the current generation to think about American Rosie movement, the spirit of the collaboration, care, and connectivity. That's what we are talking about. So the ARM, American Rosie movement website was actually developed in the WordPress. And then we had one group of the students who improved it in the last semester. Then we found another, the project in the American Rosie movement. So this American Rosie movement website provides rich information about the organization's goal and activity, including some project or some of the model partners, some of the video interview. So if you are curious, you can see that www.americanlogimovement.org, then you can find all the information in there. So when you're finding some of the projects in the ARM, the website has, if you look at the right-hand side, that's how it looks like at the beginning. So the existing project page display the complete list of the project in the long PDF for the users to scroll down. So if you look at this one at the top, you can see the project and then SA, some category, and then underneath this one is the PDF. So if you want to look at some more project, you have to scroll down and then look at this one. It's not very interactive, and then it's hard to view. And whenever you have a new project, you have to update it manually, and then that's not the easy way to update for the future project. So we try to find some solution. And in the computer science class, we have a capstone course. So ARM wanted to have a more user-friendly and interactive way for the users to see their project along with the display their location. So location is some of the places are happening in the project is happening in the DC. Some are in California, some are in the West Virginia. And then people read it, they cannot see this one. So what they want to see that where is the location of the project. So computer science capstone project team decided to design the project page in the whole, not a whole website, but just a project page using map plugins, because it's using in the WordPress. WordPress provides several different plugins. So there are many plugins. So there are some comprehensive research at the beginning. The team figured it out what is the best plugins. And also you have to consider the cost. Some of the plugins are expensive, so we want to find some reasonable cost of the product, and also having some good the features that we need. So eventually they find one plugin which is Interactive GeoMaps Pro, and then we using that tool and then creating a American Logi project page. Okay. So if you look at the next page, the right-hand side, that's how it looks like. So not all projects are in here, and then some projects still going on, okay? And then we have map-based interactive, application. So if you look at the map, then you can find some of the dots, some orange color, which is done, and the red color is still going on. And if you click it, you can see some description. That's what we made. So I can show a demonstration a little later on, but the problem with this project was once it is done, we think this is great, but we don't know how other people feels. So we usually having a usability testing. That usability testing is to receive feedback from the real people, to interact with the website and observing their behavior and the reaction to it. So there is a whole question asking the people to try. And then based on this one, we have some feedback, okay? So usability testing is a necessary step to make sure you build a effective and efficient and enjoyable experience for your users. So what we did was we finished this project in our own and then ask DH class to test it, and they're providing input. Then based on that input, we will improve the website. So DH class, I think a DH201 committed to do this for the to do this testing for the project. So I'm passing next slide, next presentation to Julie Snyder.
All right, so the DH201 class decided, and we knew we were going to do this before the class, we just weren't sure where it was going to actually hit within the class. So it was kind of an open project, but was actually really excited to have the opportunity to do this because for those of you who have taught the digital humanities, there's a lot of information, a lot of background, a lot of exciting things that you can do, but in an intro class, there's not a lot of hands-on stuff that we can do. So we look at a lot of projects and so forth. So just to give you just a quick overview of the 201 class, We looked at digital humanities projects in different disciplines. We did 2 project critiques. So we looked at the Walt Whitman archives, because we know the director of digital humanities has some fingers in that one. And then we also looked, so that was one that all of the students did. We also had another project critique where I think there was a list of about 6 or 7. And that actually also included the movable project. So try to keep that, but a variety of other projects. So students could kind of look and check out what they looked at. And so they did critiques of these projects, looking at what worked, what didn't work, what they liked, what they didn't like. So that was a couple of the major things they've done. They also examined and used a variety of digital humanities tools. So that was really great. So they've had the opportunity to do some story mapping, twine games, and a variety of other things, so they could kind of play with things. And then we got to the website usability test. And what was really nice about this is they got to see a little bit an understanding of what a project looked like, what it could look like, and got to actually provide some feedback to it. So I think this was actually a really nice flow into what the students were able to do. So if you want to, Dr. Yoo, if you want to go to the next slide. So Dr. Yoo sent us over this form, and there's a couple of different pages on it. We'll go through that. And so the students went through and looked at that, and they were able to answer questions and so forth on this about what they could find, the aesthetics, what they liked, how it was laid out, and so forth. And so students got some say in it. And I think one of the students in the audience here, Jack, he was in the digital humanities class, and I think he might have actually been in that computer class as well. So he maybe got to see that from both ends. So they did this as their assignment. And if you want to go down to the last page of the assignment, Dr. Yoo, so the questions, they filled out, go back one there. Yeah, so, and then they provided some feedback of what they thought looked well and what could be useful. And there were some really great suggestions that were provided in that feedback. And so if you want to go to the next slide, and I think Dr. Yoo will talk a little bit more about these results from more of a quantitative, and then I'll talk a little bit more about some of the qualitative responses.
Yes, there are many questions comparing the previous project web page and then new page. So there are several questions, but I only picked the 2 questions to show some results. The first one is easier to navigate. So new design is easier to navigate. It's a question number 4. And then we have it's aesthetically more attractive. That's number 5. So when you look at this one, then the blue color is the strongly agree, and the purple color is agree, and then orange color is kind of neutral. So if you look at this one, most people think that the new design is easier to navigate, and then also it is more attractive. So basically, generally there's a lot of positive response, but there are some who doesn't see the value of this new design. And then there are also a comment about this one. So I want to go to the next slide for Julie.
Yeah. So some of the student feedback then that came in, and there was kind of not necessarily, there's more like things that they liked and things that that could improve. So some of the things that they asked for were more pictures, more interactive text, a little more content when you hover. That was one thing that came up on a couple of them. When you hover over the stars, they wanted a little bit more information on there. Some of them struggled a little bit with the navigation. A couple people wanted a tutorial for the map. And one thing that was mentioned a couple times, and because this is something we actually talked about on the when we did project reviews, is usability, right? Especially for colorblind and disability enhanced. And a couple people noted that those are some things that could be improved on that project, is making sure that it was more effective for all users. However, the things like Dr. Yoo said, almost everybody said it was much improved. They really liked the improvements. They loved the map. Everybody thought the map was a really cool idea. So I think that was a really, really useful. They liked the colors. They thought it was very good. They were colors that were easy to read, but they were also kind of a little bit that red, white, and blue patriotic. They liked the content. And the students were actually, a lot of them were very curious about this project. I actually had some feedback just on the side from some students who thought this was really exciting and would love to see us do some more things like this in the future, a little bit more hands-on stuff that had an outcome. And so I thought that was really some really great and useful feedback on this. And most of them were really helpful. So I'm going to turn this back over to Dr. Yoo to tell you how to use that feedback.
Okay, yeah, so we got some of the feedback, and definitely this kind of project will motivate them to learn about how this one was done technically. Then that's a good way, good start of the learning about some technology anyway. So based on this feedback, what I did was I sent this one to the team, okay? And then team communicate with the client to improve several things. For example, some of the picture, we need some more picture, and we need some more content. So, those people, because some project has enough information, but others don't. So we come back to the client and then sending some more pictures and description of the project. So once we get this one, we will add some more things in there. And then also there's a tutorial comment. So they are working on the online help. So they thought it is very intuitive. People tend to go and then hovering and then clicking it, but maybe it's not. Okay, so we want to provide some online helps, having some star, and if you click it, some more information. So that kind of things is also thinking about it. Some of the colorblind things I already mentioned this one. So some of the things is they are actually working on it. It's not completely done because of this feedback. They are working on it, but in 1 week we are expecting to be completely done. They actually had kind of a tutorial session, training session with the client. The most important things about this project is once you deliver this one, if they do not know how to update this web page later on, it is almost useless. So 1 year later on, it will be outdated again. So something important is we providing a user manual. And then user manual is a lot of a screenshot. So if you go to, I want to add a new project, then step by step, what to do, screen by screen, click this one, click that one. So anybody who doesn't know the technology, they can still updating the web page. And then also we provide the training for the staff members. So some of the staff members who's actually doing this one without having technical background, we train them. And then providing also a video. So once this project is delivered, later on they have a new project, they can easily update by themselves without calling me. So that's the stunt I'm working on. So they had a training session and it is deployed on their machine. So if you look at the current web page, it is already replaced with this web application at this time. So we are having some more improvement based on the usability testing. It is great. Sometimes if people with some technology background give you some feedback, that's different from who doesn't have any technical background. So it's very, very helpful for us to hear some of the feedback from the student in the DH class. Especially it is a low class, right? Okay. So any questions at this time for us?
I will say it was a really great way to connect the programs. I think that's really successful. One of my students, and I was reading some feedback on some course stuff that I had to do, and she said it would have been really cool if the people that designed this could have actually come to the class or done a video to really explain it. So that might be something in the future, whether it's a live class or something, to create this. This is how we did it, because they seemed really, the students that were more interested in the humanities aspect were really interested in how it was created, which I thought was interesting. So.
Okay. Yeah, I welcome those students to come to the final capstone project presentation. At that time, they will actually show how to update the pages. So it will be interesting. I will send the invitation to you, your student. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's keep the general Q&A towards the end, because I feel like there might be a lot of questions that are relevant to both projects. but yeah, I'll definitely have you come back to the DH201 when I'm teaching it in person next semester. And I remember running a usability test on the original sort of movable layout in that class, and that was really, really fun too. So I look forward to having you back. And I think Eric is going to be in that class as well. So that's going to be fun. So here's my pitch. If you're a Marshall student and you haven't signed up, there's still 2 empty chairs in the DH201 next semester. All right, so thank you so much. There was a wonderful presentation. It's exciting to see how that project has progressed. I was sort of witness to some early conversations there, and it's really fun to see how well all of that has paid off. So again, we'll do a more general Q&A at the end here. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them now or keep them for later, but we'll be returning to a larger conversation at the end here. And now I'm gonna transition to the second project that we have today, that we're calling it Cataloging the Sermons at Charleston's Temple Israel. And we have 2 presenters on that. First of all, alphabetically, we have Eric M. Dillon, who is a 3rd-year English and computer science major at Marshall University. This semester, he has worked with Dr. Ellison, his co-presenter, on the Library of Appalachian Preaching. After graduating, Eric intends to pursue a master's degree in digital humanities or archival and information sciences. So glad to have you, Eric. And the second presenter is Dr. Robert H. Ellison, who is an associate professor of English and the director of the Center for Sermon Studies here at Marshall University. He is the co-editor of A Companion to Preaching and the Sermon, the 20th Century, which is under contract with Brill. He's also the lead curator of the Library of Appalachian Preaching, which is the subject of their presentation today. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to that team.
All right, yes, thank you, Stefan. Excuse me. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the Library of Appalachian Preaching in general, and then I will turn it over to Eric to talk about the work he has done with me this semester. So sharing the screen. All right, so here is the home page of the library. It is housed within MDS. And I am indebted to the invaluable assistance of Larry Charay over in Drinko Library, and also to the wonderful technical support that we get from the folks at B-Press. The goal, as I'm going to highlight it here, this is sort of the mission statement of the project, that we're wanting to offer online access to sermons and other addresses delivered within Appalachia or elsewhere by preachers with ties to the Appalachian region. And this project was sort of inspired by the discovery that we actually have a fairly robust collection of Appalachian sermons, primarily West Virginia, but elsewhere in Appalachia as well, over in Morrow Library. And so I started there and was able to devote full time to this project last spring when I was on sabbatical. And so now at the moment, we have approximately 150 preachers represented in the collection, and with a combined total of somewhere in the neighborhood of 2,200 sermons. And so for each of the preachers represented, and we'll just go ahead and we'll start with this one, Henry Altmeyer, who was the priest at St. Joseph's early in the 20th century. We provide access to the actual texts of their sermons. Many of these were already available out at Internet Archive or wherever, and so rather than reinventing the wheel, we would just link out to those texts. If something was not already online, then we created scans of our own and uploaded them within MDS. And so we not only have the primary texts, but we also have user guides. I've made the raw data available to users, and so each preacher has a tab in this massive Google sheet. Is it going to load here? And so you see now you can where it has various items of metadata, links out then to the full text of the sermon. And we also, in addition to each preacher having their own tab, we then have the master spreadsheet. So you can and you can, of course, as you can with any spreadsheet, go in and sort on your various columns. So if you're interested in sermons preached within a certain time period, you can sort there by column G. If you're interested in sermons preached on a particular scripture text, then you can sort by column F, and so forth. And so that those 2,200 sermons by roughly 150 preachers is a good start, but there's a whole, I don't know, the universe is probably too strong a word, but there's a whole gamut of other sermons out there that we've not yet incorporated. And as I said, I was able to give full-time attention to this last spring, and then unfortunately have not had a lot of time to devote to it since then. Primarily because I taken on some additional administrative responsibilities in the department, and that co-editorship of the edited collection that Stefan mentioned a few moments ago. And so I knew that if this was going to go forward, I was going to need help. And I'm particularly I'm wanting to start plugging some significant holes in the collection. As it stands now, the collection skews heavily Protestant, and heavily male, and heavily white, and heavily no longer living, and that's just playing the cards that I'm dealt. That's just the state of the collection in Morrow, and some other work and other places that I've been able to find some sermons. And so things that I really want to add to the project are sermons by living preachers and sermons by preachers in faith traditions other than Christianity. And so that's where this project came in. I had reached out to the rabbis of the two congregations in Charleston, and Rabbi Joe Blair at Temple Israel, who I believe is on the call with us, pointed me to the church's Facebook page, where they have the recordings of their services going back at least a year. I'm sorry, I don't have the exact dates there. And he kindly gave me permission to incorporate those things into the Library of Appalachian Preaching. And so that's then where Eric came in. We have a 400 level internship class in the English department, and we place we sometimes will place students in other units on campus. Sometimes we'll place students in at off-campus sites as well. But Eric had expressed an interest in this project, and he said he had just taken a class in archival work, and so was very interested in exploring this. And so I pretty much turned him loose to go and to view these services on his own, and to come up with the metadata that you see there. So you see there on the screen. And so now I'm going to stop sharing my screen and turn it over then to Eric, who's going to talk about his experience working with these videos, the things he has learned along the way, challenges perhaps that he has faced, and so on. So, Eric, you are on. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Dr. Ellison. This was a really wonderful experience for me, and I'm very glad I got to do it, because last semester I took an archival class in Morrow Library with Lindsay Harper and Lori Thompson. Wonderful people, and honestly a huge impact to like my career path, and I'm honestly starting to look into careers in archival. So when the English department emailed mentioning that there was an internship available specifically in archival, I was thrilled. So I actually admittedly do not have a background in religion whatsoever. I grew up in a very agnostic household. So I had to learn a lot about how sermons and these events actually worked, because I had never really been to anything in any faith whatsoever. I actually had an issue very early on where I didn't know that the sermon and the service were different things. And I was trying to archive the entire video, and it was a really huge confusion for me, but it's been a really wonderful experience in that regard. I just But yeah, it was. I really appreciate the message that I've been archiving, because even as I've been going through the archival, it's been kind of interesting because I've always had sort of understood scripture to be one of those things that you can't really, it's one way, can't be really interpreted into another way. But it's really been interesting to see that as contemporary events are going on, like with the Ukraine conflict, and I know that the Capitol riot, I know offhand, Rabbi Joe Blair specifically did his best to try and directly tie in his sermons to those conflicts, to try and give people not only just religious context, but also contemporary comfort. So it's been a really wonderful experience to kind of witness that for the first time really in my life.
So Eric, go ahead. You've come up with sort of a word cloud. Would you want to go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah, I completely forgot about that already.
Okay.
Look at that. I've got the mind of a chicken. So this is actually because when you are archiving, you have to try and find terms that come up and match with the Library of Congress standards. So that is a challenge in itself, because you will have a very complicated idea in your head. I think there's been a few of them. I believe sometimes you'll have an idea like hope is not lost, and you'll have to consolidate that into a more simplified idea that the Library of Congress especially has. Or you'll have a contemporary event that's extensively talked about, but then they won't have a category in the library for that. So you'll have to go with, again, a more broad topic. So this was just a short little, I believe there's only about 50 terms on that. That's what the little generator had available, of some of the categories that I was able to match up to the sermons. And so you've got everything from Ukraine to community and division, to mistakes and silence and Passover and time and movement, all these really big topics that were just very interesting and really were emphasized on different areas of people's lives, both on a spiritual sense and on a very direct sense of impact. So I'm gonna stop sharing that. But yes, I believe I think Rabbi Joe Blair, I believe you're in the call, but the Facebook page has been an amazing resource, and it's been really wonderful being able to witness this kind of activity for the first time. So I hope that you're happy with the work that I'm going to be pushing over to Dr. Ellison soon.
I am, Eric. Thank you. I will try harder to make it more difficult for you in future.
Listen, that's what I like to hear.
And Eric had talked a little bit about the challenges of lining up our own thinking with the thinking of the people of the Library of Congress, and putting this project together has given me mad respect for Gretchen Beach in our libraries and others who do cataloging every day, because sometimes it really was very, very difficult to find. Sometimes it was just a slam dunk. There was a really easy fit between what I had in my head and what I saw on the Library of Congress site. Other times I was really having to stretch. And so several times it was like, I don't like this, but you know what? It's going to be close enough. And so when Eric was expressing some of his struggles and frustrations to me, it was like, this is not on you. This is sort of something that's baked into the system, and so you weren't doing anything wrong or coming up short. But now, if you're thinking about a career in archives, you're experiencing some of these real world situations, maybe real world problems that librarians and archivists have had to face in this project. And also a huge shout out to Lori Thompson, Lindsay Harper, others in Morrow. This has really helped me to think because of course I bring my work as a sermon scholar to the table, but now I'm having to learn to think like a librarian, like an archivist, like a user, talking about usability testing and so forth. So it's been, I think, Eric, it's been a very stretching experience for both of us.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So it seems like we're opening up into a larger Q&A. So Robert has already responded to, and Eric as well, to responded to the question of what the biggest challenges were. So I wonder if Julie would like to follow up on that. What were some of the struggles that you faced in your group?
With getting with the usability stuff?
Or in general with the project?
I was going to say, with the usability, I put a hard and fast, like a lot of, I think everybody that you talked to this year has said this has been the weirdest semester ever and getting stuff done. So I actually put a hard and fast deadline on, and this is like the one hard and fast deadline I think I had for the whole entire semester. But getting people to still do that, I think there was still 4 or 5 people that did not get the stuff done. So I think that was one of the challenges of doing that. But I think it was a great experience, and I actually was thinking about your guys' project as you were talking about it a little bit. What is your ultimate goal for that project, if I can ask?
For the library, you mean? For
the library, yeah.
Well, it would certainly be hubris, I think, to say we're trying to make this comprehensive. There's just there's no way we're going to encompass, all of Appalachia in all time periods or whatever. Yeah. But I do want to make this as broad and as representative and as inclusive as I can, because there are voices out there that tend not to get heard as much. The Jewish voices, the Islamic voices, the Black voices, women voices, all of those sorts of things. And I said earlier, up to this point, I've largely been constrained by what Morrow gave me. But I was very pleased that by the end of my sabbatical, I finished up the stuff that's in Morrow. It was very nice to say, here's a finite thing that I really can say we're done with, right? Now, there might be a long lost sermon, hiding on the shelves somewhere, but I think for pretty much we can call it done. Now I get to make my own decisions about now what do I want to go out and look for next, and that's kind of where, okay, now I'm looking for these other types of voices so we can tell the more robust story of what preaching in Appalachia looks like.
Cool. It's a really neat project.
Oh, thank you.
So.
Yes, thank you. And I should mention that you should have seen that pop up on your screen. Everyone's a presenter now, which just means that if you want to speak and ask a question and or turn on your camera, you may absolutely do that now. I have a couple of questions, but I'm specifically going to prompt the audience. Do you have any questions, any pieces of feedback, anything you want to know about?
I was wondering, actually, Jack, I think he's still there. Jack was in both of the classes. I was wondering, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Jack, and maybe there'll even be extra credit. But if you have any thoughts on kind of the bridge between the digital humanities aspect and the computing aspect for this project.
I don't know if I have a bridge particularly in mind, but I just thought it was neat to see how, when the project was brought up in my capstone class, that how it directly correlated, and I was like, oh yeah, this is what digital humanities is about. It's about putting those stories out there in a way that's easier for people to see. So a lot of digital humanities is like, how do you present the information that's so like quantitative and make it for people to view it easier? So.
Cool, thank you, Jack.
I have a question for Robert and Eric, and that might be way too specific, but I'm a 19th century scholar, and whenever I hear somebody who's saying, I'm going to digitize stuff from the 20th and 21st century, I'm always getting a little bit scared because I'm immediately thinking of copyright. Is that something you've encountered at all? I just assumed sermons would be copyrighted, but maybe they aren't. Could you speak to that?
Well, I learned a whole lot about copyright law. in the course of doing this. Yeah, we have. Let's see if I can. I don't want to misspeak here, because it's sort of a rolling not deadline, but new things come into the public domain every year, right? And so we're at now. I think we're at the beginning of 2022. Anything from, well, I think it's 95 years is now in public domain. So anything 19th century, it's fair game. And then anything from the early 20th century is fair game. And one of the things that you will notice some places in that master spreadsheet, I have sermons that I had cataloged, but I could not provide links out to the actual text because they were still under copyright. And once those things pass into the public domain, then I can go back in and upload those scans and add those hyperlinks.
Yeah, I think it's 1926, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah. That's sort of the big copyright date. But yeah. All right, wonderful. So you're sort of doing the same thing as Google is doing. You're sort of setting it all up and then you're just waiting for the date. Yeah, it's pretty cool. Yeah. I have a question for both of you. I see Jill is typing, so let her type. What kind of collaborations are you guys interested in? What kind of students would you like to work with? What kind of faculty projects are you interested in? If somebody watches this and they think this sounds neat, how can they collaborate with you?
I guess I'll go ahead and start. One of the other things that I would like to see happen with this project is visualizations and mapping and so forth. I haven't done a lot of that simply because of time constraints. My focus has just been getting the text up there, and also because I'm not a visually oriented person. And so if we were to find someone over in geography, someone working with Hilton, for example, who said, yeah, I'm really interested in mapping and data visualization, I've got, well, 2,200, pieces of data for them to work with. So I would love to have collaborators along those lines. I'm thinking that there's enough material up there now, not just for interns like for what Eric was doing, but for students who are working on capstone projects, for students who are doing perhaps even MA theses. And I know we don't have a formal specialization in DH on the grad side, but folks in the department tell me that there's almost more interest amongst our graduate students than there is amongst our undergrads for doing DH type stuff. And so people can get at it from the standpoint of religious, the standpoint of religious studies, of history. I'm gonna step on Julie's toes here now, from communication studies, computer science. There's just the sky is the limit, which actually sort of speaks to Jill's question about how does one draw the boundaries of digital humanities. Are we just going to sort of be like the Borg and just go assimilate everything, or are we going to erect walls somewhere?
Thank you, Julie. You're still muted. Do you want to speak to that? Okay.
Sorry. Which part? Like what Jill's asking, or what in general? Or
we're getting to Jill in a second here, because that's an interesting question as well. But basically, right, what kind of collaborations are you looking for? If faculty or students are watching this and they're interested in the project, what can they do to get involved? How can they get involved?
I think, well, I think too, if people have projects, right? If they have ideas, in my mind, I have like 8 million ideas of projects, and I'm guessing probably half of digital humanities has that many too. But I know that at one point Steve Underhill was looking at doing maybe some collections and things related to some movies, and some of the stuff he did with films in NASA would be a great way to make some connections with digital humanities. I think there's a lot of times there's just projects out there, and sometimes it's about us who are faculties just throwing it out there and finding the students. And sometimes too, there might be students that have some ideas for maybe smaller projects or ongoing projects. But I think that the 201 class is a great way to lead into projects, but it might even be something in the future, you know, depending on the role of digital humanities at Marshall, is maybe at some point there is a projects class or a specific internship class for that, where there is a project, might be a really nice direction to go. But I think if people are listening and they're thinking about projects, I think really just reaching out to anybody in the program, because I think that there's a number of us in different areas. And like I said, it's been really fun. I work with Dr. Yoo on a grant, but we initially got connected through digital humanities. So we've had this, but it's actually, for me, it's actually really nice to work with somebody that has that computer background, because that's not my strong suit. And so we've actually talked about some future collaborations, you know, that could be something that would lead into projects. But yeah, I think there's just, it can go all directions. So I think just people reaching out one way or the other. So.
Yeah, and we're basically the current instructors for DH201. So I think it's fair to say we're always happy to volunteer our students for a week or a couple of weeks to have them work on an actual project, because the hands-on stuff is so much more valuable than any other assignment we could do in that time, probably. So I certainly second that sort of larger pitch for collaborations with DH201. So we should get to Jill's question. I love how we're calling out the Underhills now that after Squad. But essentially, she's asking, right, what is the digital humanities? Which is great, because that's what we'll try to answer when we teach that class in the first couple of weeks. And I'm not sure how Julie is doing that, but I basically have students read a whole bunch of competing definitions, a couple of articles where people complain about the fact that there is no universal definition, and then we just move on. And this is basically what DH is, right? It's the idea that there's methods or theories in the field of traditional sort of computer science field that can be of benefit to the humanities and vice versa. And we sort of hope to engage that sort of communication across divides here in that sense. So we always talk about computer games, at least briefly in that class, which is sort of a nice example, right, that sits between traditional humanities stuff, right, storytelling, all these kind of things, and sort of hard computer science. And it's exciting, but also frustrating to sit in the middle of that, because you feel like you have sort of your toes in a lot of different pots, but you're never quite an expert, which I think is a good feeling, but it's also a stressful feeling. And I invite more people to participate in that. All right. Do you want to volunteer your own personal definitions of DH, Julie, Robert, Eric?
Well, I'll say something. Back a couple of years ago now, I was part of a team, a three-way team that team taught the Intro to Digital Literary Studies class. Kristen Lovis and Ian Nolte were the other two, and as we were sort of getting those balls rolling, I mentioned sort of an interesting semantic shift that had happened, you know, sort of back in the day, and I can't nail down when this shift changed, but the phrasing back in the day was humanities computing. So you had computing being the noun and humanities being the adjective, and now that script has totally flipped, because now we have digital humanities, where humanities is taking sort of center stage as the noun, with digital being the modifier. And I think that's, you know, I don't know that that's merely sort of playing with words. There probably is some real substance behind that shift.
Thank you. Yeah, agreed. Julie?
I think you guys kind of covered it, but I know I want to kind of echo what Stefan said about the, you know, people like, I still don't know what it is. I still don't know what it is. I think the final reflection for the class, I echo what people say, I still don't know what it is, but I think it's exciting, because one of the things in reviewing some of the responses in a lot of the discussions is that there's a little component on like the video games and coding with using twine games. And it's so interesting, because I noticed with a lot of the people that were more on the computer side, how they kind of like, I really loved the idea of that I could use this to tell a story, right? Their stories weren't always the best. Some were great, but the Twines were exceptional, right? And then I had the more humanities side who had fantastic stories, but struggled with some of the coding. And so it was such an interesting thing to see, you know, if we could get these people together, how phenomenal some of these things could be. So I think, yeah, so I think it really is, it's just, there's this bridge between kind of the humanities and the kind of the science and the computing that's there. And actually maybe not a bridge, but maybe a bunch of bridges, making these connections in different ways. And so I think that that definition is, there's never going to be a good solid definition, which I think is the benefit of all of this, because you can kind of, especially when you're teaching the DH201 or other classes, is you can kind of create a meaning for that particular class or that particular project. And I think that's really an essential part of it.
And of course, these conversations exist in all fields, right? If you ask 10 English professors what a novel is, you'll get very different answers as well. But I think it's really sort of nice to see these two projects and some of the other projects that came out of Marshall, because they do illustrate sort of a new wave of the age, right? When the age was new, the big thing was, right, everybody had a Shakespeare lab. Right, and the Walt Whitman archive to a degree as well, right? You have these big canonical authors, and you apply digital tools and methods and archival structures to them, right? But what we're doing here, and what I see a lot of, especially smaller programs doing in a very productive way, is do sort of grassroots DH, where we're not beginning with a high-level thing, right? We want to prove this manuscript was Shakespeare, even though we don't have any, and we're not even close to any manuscripts by Shakespeare here, right? But we're looking at what we have and what we have in our repositories here, right? Jack mentions in the comments here that there should be more work with the stuff that we have at Morrow, and I agree. There's so much great stuff in there. And just putting that out there suddenly puts it in conversation with national and global querying on Google. And it's really exciting to see those sort of unpredictable pathways that lead people to then engage with the projects that you're involved in. This hyperlocal thing suddenly has this sort of global neighborhood that it's playing in, and it's really neat. I've landed on the obscurest projects, and they've helped me so much. I just discovered a website that some guy did in the late 90s about the history of waterworks in New York. I'm not sure anybody has looked at that site anytime recently, but I found it immensely helpful. And I can see so many people discovering the Appalachian Sermon Project in a different pathway, where they might not have been looking for that, but once they found it, it was exactly what they wanted to see. So this is all super exciting to me. And it's neat to see that we have sort of a core group of faculty that are really interested in sort of taking what's here and upscaling that into practical, usable projects that can have all of these exciting sort of afterlives and lives on the internet. Thank you so much. Do we have other questions, comments? Hoping I didn't overlook something on what Steven said here.
I think I've got one more comment.
Yes, go for it.
I think digital humanities, I believe you said something earlier about kind of like dipping your toes into everything, but not quite mastering it. I think that's definitely where I'm at right now with both in my English and computer science majors. I can do them both, but I think that truly, like when they're integrated together, Lord, someone's calling me. But I think when it's integrated both together is when my passion and my best work is produced, honestly. You know, I've done traditional computer science work, I've done traditional English writing, but once you tell me go write something about a video game, go do some archival, go do this or that, it really, the quality of my work, at least in particular, it really is exponentially better. So I think allowing students to engage in multiple areas and not forcing them to pick, okay, you either have to go with a more of a liberal arts or more of the typical technology side. I think that's one of the really great aspects of it in my experience.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating combination, Eric. I think that's great that you're doing something like that. That's just, I think we often, like you said, it's like people think they're tracked, whether, they're strong in one thing or the other. And, I think schools and even colleges to some extent, we track people. It's like, you're going to be this or you're going to be that. And I think it's nice when those people can find that, how do we unite those two things? Because it's like, I think we all have the capability of doing that if we want to. So I think that's awesome. And I can't wait to see where you end up. So
thank you so much.
He's going to end up in DH201 first. Which is a good place. Robert, did you want to say something? It looked like you were. No, you tapped it in. Perfect. Yeah, honor seminars. Yeah, I agree. I think that's a good sort of starting platform to get projects off the ground and get a lot of the sort of infrastructure in place, get like a solid corpus of text transcribed, and then sort of take it into a running start into other classes and grants and all of these things. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much. I think we're basically out of time. We're in our last minute. So if we have any final comments, speak now or don't. All right. Thank you so much. Okay, this concludes our conversation. This was wonderful. Thank you so much for both our presenter teams. Thank you so much for everybody watching live, or to those watching this at a later point on YouTube. As I mentioned in the beginning, and I'll remind you now here, is there will be a version of this that exists on the internet. So if you joined late, or if you want to consult the video again, send me an email. I'll send you a link once that's up. That should be up later today. Otherwise, if you are interested in being a part of one of those digital humanities conversations in the next semester, please also get in contact with me. If you're interested in the Library of Appalachian preaching, get in contact with Robert. If you're interested in the American Rosie movement project, get in contact with Julie. Thank you so much. Good luck with everyone's final week. Thank you for coming out, and have a wonderful rest of your evening.
All right.
Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.